Welcome at Business English lecture devoted to stress, or rather occupational stress management. Today we are going to speak about general stress at first, then about occupational stress, potential stressors, and ways of coping with stress. So let's start with the definition. So to understand what makes us stressed, how we react to stress, or how we cope with stress, we should at first try to understand what stress is. If it was face-to-face lecture, I would ask you a question now. What do you think about if I say stress? Some people say headache, frustration, tension, diarrhea, stomach problems, sleeplessness, and many more. According to specialists in the field, stress can be defined as automatic, non-specific response of your body to any demand made on it. Why automatic? Why non-specific? Automatic because it's beyond your will. It simply happens. You perceive something as a threat, demand, and your body reacts in a certain way. Why non-specific response of your body? Because each person has their own unique response. In case of person A, it could be diarrhea. In case of person B, sleeplessness. In case of person C, aggression. Stress is usually connected with adrenaline. This is a hormone that is released if you are under the influence of stress. If we are stressed, we can either try to avoid the problem or attack it. Therefore, we may speak about flight or fight response to stress, and it varies from individual to individual. And stress, just summing up, stress is just physical and emotional reaction to any pressure, change, fear, or the unknown. Researchers dealing with stress say that change is number one stressor for many people because we fear unknown things. We don't know what to expect, and some emotional reactions are triggered. Is all stress bad? Probably your answer is no. Of course not. First of all, let's face it, we cannot live without stress. Stress is an inevitable part of our life, especially if we are active people, if we work. Occupational stress is inevitable. Can it be positive? Can it play a positive role in our life? Well, it certainly can, because it can motivate us to do something. It can give us extra energy because of adrenaline being released. In case of this so-called positive stress, we speak about eustress, spelled E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. The negative stress that makes you tired, angry, that makes you do some stupid things, that destroys you somehow, is called distress, D-I-S-T-R-E-S-S. So we may speak about eustress and distress. Of course, too much stress is a bad thing, and it's common truth. Too little stress is also a bad thing, because you lose motivation, you may become depressed, tired, and so on and so forth. So the best, if we speak about stress and we are aware that it is part of our life, let's face it that we need moderate levels of stress. And of course, workplace stress is integral and inevitable part of our working life. This type of stress arises when we as individuals perceive imbalance, so the lack of balance between the pressures and demands made on us, and between those demands and the resources we have to cope with them. So some people demand something we feel we don't have adequate resources. By resources we may mean real resources like, I don't know, copy paper, but also such resources as time, knowledge, and so on and so forth. What are the signs of stress? As I already said, it depends from individual to individual. But the most common signs of stress are, for instance, irritability. So you feel irritable. You tend to have sleeping problems. You don't get any joy out of life. Your appetite is disturbed both ways. You either don't eat or you eat too much. We may say that you eat up stress. And you have relationship problems, communication problems with other people. We may divide workplace stress and its symptoms into acute and chronic. What's the difference? Acute, right now we have the symptoms because of something stressful happening. Chronic, when we are under the influence of stress for a longer time and it induces some changes in our body and mind. Let's start with acute symptoms of stress. First of all, alertness and excitement. We are very energetic, very excited, alerted. Well, for a short period of time, it's quite okay. As I said, it can even motivate us. But imagine 8 hours of such alertness. Then at the end of the day, you are dead tired. Uneasiness and worry. You don't know what to expect. You feel nervous. Or another acute symptom, feeling of sadness. You feel sad because you are frustrated, you are afraid of changes and so on. Loss of appetite, as I mentioned, increased metabolism, which refers to some stomach problems. Chronic symptoms of stress are more serious and they persist for longer. They were grouped. The first group refers to anxiety and panic attacks. So your general anxiety changes, yes, it's higher than usually. You have panic attacks. And panic attacks not only need to be, moments when you yell or scream that you are afraid. Panic attacks are also manifested if you think, for instance, you're going to have a heart attack in a minute or two. You call an ambulance, they come, they say everything's okay with your heart, but you feel you're going to die. So this is also a classic panic attack. Another chronic symptom of stress, depression. Of course, stress is not the only cause of depression, yes, but it can be one of the causes. Eating disturbances, so more serious eating problems like anorexia, bulimia, and so on. Lower resistance to illnesses and to further stress. Diabetes. Not directly connected, but for instance, because of stress, you eat too much. You eat sweets because you eat up stress, and so on and so forth. High blood pressure, because you are frustrated and nervous all the time. If you have high blood pressure for a long period of time, it may lead to cardiovascular disease, which is even more serious. Loss of sex drive as a symptom of chronic stress. Of course, not always, and more common in case of women. If we speak about work stress, we shall emphasize that it can have stronger impact if it's combined with other types of stress, like for instance home stress, so stress associated with your personal life, and work stress. Then it is more acute. And of course those two types of stress influence each other. How to identify stressors and what stressors are? Stressors are factors evoking stress. You need to identify your stressors on your own. Try to spot the time when you become afraid, irritable, nervous, anxious, extra energetic, and then get tired, and so on and so forth. Those stressors are situations, activities, relationships that cause trauma to your physical, emotional, or psychological self. Also negative people. There are many work situations that can cause stress. First of all, new job responsibilities, work procedures, because it's connected with the unknown changes. Number two, your concerns over job security. You don't know if you will get a job contract, for instance. You don't know if you are going to get a pay rise. You don't know if they want to cooperate with you next month, and so on and so forth. Work overload or work underload. Overload when we have too much to do. Underload when there's nothing to do basically, or very few things to do and you think they may not need you. So it's connected with job security. Tight deadlines. Some people say that tight deadlines are motivating, whereas others say it's their source of stress. So again, it varies from individual to individual. Difficult personal relationships, communication problems as a source of stress. If you cannot communicate effectively with your co-workers, or if they are difficult to communicate with, it may result in stress. Last but not least, the feeling you lack control over your job, future, and so on and so forth. People work better if they have some degrees of control and autonomy, if they can decide what they need to do and how to do projects, for instance. And many, many more, of course. So work-related stressors, just to sum up what I already said, may be grouped. Some of them may refer to role ambiguity. You don't know what is expected from you, how you should do certain tasks. Work overload and underload. Too many things, too few things to do. Occupation. And this is very interesting. What do you think? Think for a while. Are there any jobs that are more stressful than average, let's say? According to research, such jobs are, for instance, the job of an airline pilot, quite obvious for you probably. Surgeon, also quite obvious, but also teachers, managers, because it involves dealing with other people. Working with people is stressful, because it means communicating, exchanging, negotiating, and so on and so forth. Next group of work-related stressors refer to resource inadequacy. If you don't have enough resources, you don't have access to resources. As I mentioned earlier, resources like paper, printer, computer, your own desk at work, but also resources like time, for instance. Next very important group, working conditions. So where you work, as I mentioned earlier, if you have your own desk, but also such things that seem stupid at first, but they are really important, like light quality, air quality in your workplace, noise levels, and so on and so forth. To deal with this problem, if it's allowed in your workplace, you can try to personalize your space. For instance, to have some plants, and plants are set to reduce levels of stress. Besides, you feel the desk is yours. You feel safe, there's something stable in your life. Besides, plants make the air quality better. When it comes to light quality, you may simply try to change the light bulb. If it's about noise levels, maybe close the window or ask your colleagues not to listen to music, ask them to use headphones, and so on and so forth. So if you can change some things, try to do it. If you cannot, either accept the situation or change your working life, your working routines. But of course it's easier said than done. Next group of work-related stressors is management style. We may speak about three main management styles: autocratic, democratic, and so-called laissez-faire management style. Autocratic, so the boss decides on everything. Some people say they feel safe. The others say they lack control over their own job, tasks, autonomy. Democratic management style, the best style, but very rarely used. So you are part of the decision-making process. There's some responsibility delegated to you. You feel needed, you feel responsible, you feel worthy. And laissez-faire management style, do what you want. But then I, as a boss, expect some results. Also triggers high levels of stress, because you don't know what is expected, so connected with role ambiguity. On the other hand, then someone wants the results, and it is stressful to some people, like autocratic style. Another thing triggering workplace stress is monitoring, like cameras. You know what I mean, Big Brother is watching, yeah. For some people it is stressful, others don't pay attention. Some people say open space is connected with this monitoring because everyone can observe you. It's up to you. From my own experience, when I talk to students about it, the younger the generation of students, the less they care about monitoring and open space. Last but not least, group of work-related stressors connected with job security. As I said earlier, what kind of contract do you have, if you have any, for how long, how much you earn, if you are satisfied, if you can get promoted, because sometimes it's an issue of ambition, and so on and so forth. And as I said, just to sum up, there are many workplace situations that may cause stress, like new job responsibilities, overload, difficult relationships, and so on and so forth. We may also speak about so-called extreme jobs. We may speak about an extreme job if people work 60 hours or more per week. We all tend to do it from time to time, don't we? The question is if we can like our job so much to put in extra time. Does it mean we are workaholics? What about so-called work-life balance? Very fashionable word nowadays. But how to maintain it if we are so overloaded? We may try to work out our own strategies. And we need to be our own guardians. We need to say stop at some point if we work too much. There are also individual differences that have an influence on how we experience stress. First of all, type A versus type B personality. Just in a nutshell, who is type A? Type A is a person who is very ambitious, loves winning at various games, needs to be first all the time, a person that is a perfectionist. Type B is the other way round. According to research, type A correlates with high stress levels. Another thing is self-esteem. Self-esteem is shaped in your childhood and early adolescence. If you have high self-esteem, you tend to feel better. You feel you have coping potential. If your self-esteem is low, you are more prone to stress. last but not least, gender. I'm curious what you think about it. So, do men and women experience stress in a different way? Who is more prone to stress? We cannot say that one gender is more prone to stress than the other. First of all, it varies from individual to individual. Secondly, it depends on a situation, yes? The most important thing in this context is that men and women react to stress in a different way. Women in general tend to be more emotional, so it's easily spotted in majority of cases if they are under the influence of stress. Men don't usually cry or scream. On the other hand, if they are under the influence of stress for a long period of time, it may result in high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and so on and so forth. They don't speak about their problems as often as women do. So we just react in a different way. Of course, repeated or constant stress is physically and emotionally harmful. What can it cause? For instance, increased heart attack risk, high blood pressure, as I already said, strain, strong headaches, exhaustion. If you are exhausted, you are more susceptible to illnesses. Sometimes even depression, panic, inability to cope with serious or even some stupid problems because you are so emotionally tired as a reaction to long-term stress. We may divide negative effects of stress into physical, emotional and behavioral. When it comes to physical, negative effects of stress, for instance, weight gain or loss, because you either eat too much or you don't eat. Unexpected hair loss, some heart palpitations, high blood pressure. When it comes to most common emotional negative effects of stress, we may speak about mood swings, so your mood changes rapidly, anxiety, depression, some unhealthy coping strategies like alcohol, drugs, excessive coffee, and this is behavioral, yes, it's not only emotional but behavioral consequences of stress. We may speak about consequences of stress for the individual and for the organization. When it comes to individual consequences of stress, these are the ones already discussed: psychological, behavioral and physiological ones. Organizational consequences of stress: first of all, absenteeism.